back. Today I'm going to be doing the final part of my bookshelf unhaul series. This is part 6. I have about like 30 minutes to film this video before I have to go do something. So if I'm rushed, that's kind of why, but I really want to get it done today. We're gonna start with these books here. This shelf mostly houses my nonfiction, my manga, and graphic novels. Like I said, it's not very full. Like there's no books down here. There's only books here, and then obviously that shelf is full, and then there's some books here. So this shouldn't take very long, but you know me, I do have a tendency to ramble. So fingers crossed that doesn't happen. All right, the first book I've got here is To Kill a Mockingbird by Tim Federle. Is that how you say it? This is cocktails with a literary twist. This book was gifted to me by my best friend several years ago for Christmas. It's just like a bunch of cocktails based on books and stuff, and I actually have made a couple of the cocktails from here, and they were, you know, fine. They were good. I'm keeping it, obviously, one, because it was a gift, 2, because I would eventually like to make all the drinks in here, and 3, it's just like this really cute little quirky book, so I'm gonna keep it on my shelf. Next up, I have the box set of the first 4 books in the Song of Ice and Fire series by George R. Martin, obviously starting with Game of Thrones. These are like crammed in there, so I'm not gonna pull them out. I have read the first book and I liked it. Actually, I really loved it. And then I watched the entire show, and the show, the way it ended has kind of like tainted the Song of Ice and Fire series for me. I know that the books, like George R. Martin is not intending to end the book series the same way that the TV show ended, but I'm still just, I don't know, I'm a little bit like about it now. So I actually think I'm gonna unhaul these. Like I said, I read this one years ago, like 2014 or 15, and never continued on with the series, and at this point I'm just not like super like excited about it anymore. And if I did like want to revisit the series at some point, I'd honestly probably just rewatch the show, which I know is so bad and I probably shouldn't say that, but it's the reality. I also just don't love reading like huge fantasy books like this in this mass market like style. So if I did want to like physically read these at some point, I'd probably get like the big chunky paperbacks to read. So I'm unhauling these. Next up, I also have the box set of the entire Lord of the Rings series, including The Hobbit. I have read The Fellowship of the Ring. Actually, I read it as an ebook a long time ago, so these books look unread. I love the Lord of the Rings movies. They're like, it's like my favorite movie series ever, and I rewatch them very frequently, and I love them so much. And so I bought the books with the intention of reading them at some point, but to be honest, I don't love these editions. I still want to reread the Lord of the Rings. Actually, one of my coworkers is currently reading it right now, and she's loving it, and it's kind of inspired me to want to read the series at some point, but I want to get like some nice pretty editions to read that are better than like these mass market paperbacks, which again, can't really pull out, but I just don't love the mass market. I'm actually just gonna go ahead and unhaul the entire box set, and we'll buy some newer, nicer, prettier editions whenever I decide I want to read the series. Next up, I have got the entirety of my Pelican Shakespeare collection. I love these editions of Shakespeare's plays so much. First of all, we all know, if you've been here any amount of time, you know that I'm a Shakespeare slut and I love anything relating to Shakespeare, and I really love these editions that they've been publishing over the last few years. I really want to collect them all, you know, like Pokemon, gotta catch them all. I have 7 different ones right now. I have 6 plays and the sonnets, and like I said, I want to get them all, but obviously I will be keeping these because I love them. The next shelf is nonfiction mostly. I also have some, well, I have my 2 Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Oh my god. I have my 2 Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, like the little TED Talk / little things that she wrote. We Should All Be Feminists and Dear Ijuele, or A Feminist Manifesto and 15 Suggestions. I would highly recommend these if you are interested in learning more about feminism. They're pretty like intro to feminism in my opinion, but they're really worth the read. I liked both of them a lot, and obviously I love these little editions of them, so I'm keeping these. And then I have some like spirituality, like Christianity books that I got various places, which I'm going to be keeping. I'm not going to show them. I also have a 365-day Bible that I got for Christmas a few years ago. So obviously I'm gonna be keeping this stuff, but I'm not gonna like go into what it is because most of it I actually haven't read. Well, I've read the Bible, but I haven't read the other stuff, so I don't know. But they're not like technically on my TBR. It's just stuff that I keep to, you know, educate myself further on Christianity and myself, I guess. So next up, I have the 2 books that were published by Grace Helbig, Grace's Guide, The Art of Pretending to be a Grown-Up, and Grace in Style, The Art of Pretending You Have It. I have read these. Well, I read this one for sure. I think, yeah, I've read this one for sure. And then I got this because I found it really cheap at a used bookstore. I used to really love Grace. It's Grace Helbig. We all know who she is. Not so much lately, mostly just because she hasn't really been uploading a lot. And I feel like she's kind of drifting away from the YouTube sphere, which is totally fine, totally valid. That being said, I don't think I'm gonna keep these. It's kind of like self-helpy. It's like, you know, finding yourself. This is like a style guide, which is weird because I wouldn't consider Grace like a fashion icon, but you know, she has that very specific sense of humor that's like sarcastic, super dry. I don't know, like, you know what I'm talking about. If you've seen any Grace video or seen anything she's in, you know what I'm talking about. These are fine. I feel fine about them, but I no longer need to hold on to them, so I am unhauling them both. Next up, I've got My Drunk Kitchen by Hannah Hart, another YouTuber that I used to absolutely love, and this is a cookbook, so I'm gonna keep it. I've never actually cooked anything out of here, but I would be interested in doing so. I got a lot of cookbooks for my wedding, and I tend to cook a lot of the same things over and over. So I'm gonna keep this, maybe spruce up my, you know, menu of items that I cook. I'm gonna actually just move this to the kitchen where the other cookbooks are at some point, but there's this as well. Next up, I've got Buffering, also by Hannah Hart. This is the like memoir that Hannah wrote a few years ago, and this is one of my favorite memoirs that I've ever read. Aside from her just being, you know, a YouTube personality, this really like gives you a glimpse of her as a person, like what, you know, who she is, and it made me cry, and I really enjoyed it. And if you are a fan of Hannah, I would recommend it, obviously, but also if you just want a book that is sad but also incredibly hopeful, then I would for sure recommend this. And I'm keeping it on my shelf in case that wasn't clear. Next up, I've got Yes Please by Amy Poehler, which I bought super cheap at a thrift store a few years ago, like quite a few years ago at this point, and I have read this and I really enjoyed it, but it's not a book that I could foresee myself rereading. I've kept it on my shelf all these years for so long just because I'm a big fan of Amy Poehler, and I, you know, thought maybe I might reread it or recommend it or lend it out to someone, but I can't really see myself like wanting to revisit this. And if I did, I'd just go for the audiobook. So I'm gonna unhaul this. Next, I've got Furiously Happy by Jenny Lawson, which is a pretty popular memoir that I feel like a bunch of people have read. I have not yet read it, but I'm still super interested in it, so I'm going to be keeping this one on my TBR. Next, I've got On Reading Well by Karen Swallow Pryor. This was gifted to me by my best friend for Christmas a few years ago. This is like, it's like a book recommendations type of video, or type of book, but it also is religious, like it has to do with Christianity. So I am going to be keeping this, and I will read it at some point. This is also one of the books on my TBR, I guess it's technically on my TBR, that has the highest rating on Goodreads. Like the Goodreads rating for this book is like so almost a 5-star, honestly. So that has me even more intrigued. I don't know why I haven't read it yet, but I will get to it at some point. And I'm sorry that I haven't read it yet, Margot. I'm the worst. The next book I have here is An Astronaut's Guide to Life on Earth by Chris Hadfield. This is a nonfiction book. These are all nonfiction. I'm not going to say that every time. This is about Chris Hadfield. He was a Canadian astronaut, or he is a Canadian astronaut that spent a good majority of time on the International Space Station, and this is all about what happens when he comes back after he's been up there for so long. I think he went up there, I think he was up there a few times, and it's all about him like integrating to life on Earth. But I do believe it's actually kind of like a whole life story. Like it talks about him like getting into the aerospace program, like working at NASA, and then eventually like becoming an astronaut, going to space, living up there for an extended period of time, and then coming home. I've heard it's really good. I have the audiobook of this one as well, and it's one that I'm super interested in reading and definitely want to get to at some point. So I'm going to be keeping this, and hopefully I will read and enjoy it. Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. This is the third of 3 unread Jesmyn Ward books on my shelves. This is also one that I'm still super interested in. I'm going to be keeping it. This is all about Jesmyn Ward growing up, I think in the South, and coming to terms with her identity, but also her relationship with a bunch of different men in her life. And I've heard it's super, super good, and we'll eventually get around to reading it, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Next is Eating Animals by Jonathan Severan Foer. This is all about the animal industry, meat consumption industry, and going vegetarian is something that I've definitely considered a lot in my life. I have done periods of time where I don't eat meat, and it's something that I'm still super interested in, and I always want to educate myself more. So this is one that I'm going to be keeping and reading at some point. It's not like most of these nonfiction books are not super high priority for me. So it's why they're there whenever I just like get the spark to want to like educate myself about a certain topic. It's not like the top of the TBR, you know, because it's, you know, you have to be in a specific mood to read nonfiction. Next up is The Collected Schizophrenias by Esme Weijen Wang. This is on my 2020 TBR. This is a book, a collection of essays all about this author's experience being diagnosed with schizophrenia, and also just her experience in general, even like I think before her diagnosis. And I've heard amazing things about it. It comes very highly recommended by people who I really trust. Next up is You Deserve a Drink by Hart, also a YouTuber, somebody that I was into. Obviously, can you tell that I used to be really into Grace Hannah Mamrie? I have not read this, but I don't think I'm interested in it anymore, to be honest. I mean, I still like Mamrie. Her personality is great. I will still continue to consume the media that she puts out on the internet or just anywhere in general, but I don't think I want to read this anymore, so I'm gonna unhaul it. Next up, I've got Bill Bryson's Shakespeare, The World a Stage. As we've already established, I'm a huge Shakespeare fan, and I am interested in all things Shakespeare. I think this is just like the history of the stage productions of Shakespeare plays. I actually don't know a lot. I bought this at a used bookstore when I went to visit my brother like last year, and I haven't read it, but I still want to, so I'm gonna keep it. Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay, another book that was gifted to me by my best friend. I'm so bad at reading the books that she gives me, even though she gets me books that are always on my wish list, so sorry about that, Margot, if you're watching. This is one I'm still interested in. Definitely gonna be keeping it. It's all about, you know, feminism in the modern day. Roxane Gay is an author that I hear so many endless good things about, so I am excited to read this at some point. How to Be a Heroine by Samantha Ellis. This is about like popular females in the literary world. I think like some of the main characters, or some of the people in here, Anne of Green Gables, Jane Eyre, Franny Glass, Lizzie Bennet, Scarlett O'Hara, people like that. And I think it's just like little essays about them as characters, like little character studies about them, and something I'm still super interested in reading, so I am going to hang on to this. The reason I haven't read this yet is because I haven't read all of the books that the characters like in here are from, so I think that's why I've just been kind of putting it off. Like I want to be really familiar with all of the like source texts, or like, yeah, all the source material before I jump into something like this, but eventually I will read it and hopefully I will enjoy it. Next is The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. This is another nonfiction book. Why do I keep saying that? This is one that I'm still really interested in reading. It's one that comes so highly recommended by so many people. I got it at a thrift store years ago that doesn't even exist anymore. I bought it on June 11th, 2015, so it's been on my shelf unread since 2015. Next up, I've got my Into Thin Air, the original copy that I read. I already spoke about this book in a previous installment of this series. I got this book when my best friend and I traveled to Chicago. We went on like this spur of the moment random trip to Chicago. We were there for basically 48 hours. That was it. And we went to this little bookstore. I bought this. I read it. I loved it. And I'm keeping it. Obviously, it's one of my favorite books. And this edition not only is the one I initially read, but it's also got such a special memory attached to it. It's a book that I bought the first time I went to Chicago. So keeping it for sure. Wild by Cheryl Strayed is another book that I'm really interested in reading, especially after reading Into Thin Air. I'm even more interested in reading this one now. I had to give myself some space from that book because I loved it so much, and I knew that if I tried to pick up another like wilderness, like hiking book, that I would be constantly comparing it to that, and I feel like I still am in that place right now. So even though I haven't read this yet, I'm still super interested in it, and it's staying on my TBR. Next up is 84 Charing Cross Road by Helene Hanff, which is this lovely little collection of letters between a woman in New York City, well, the author in New York City, and a bookseller in London. I think it was during the 70s she started this correspondence with this bookseller, and they became friends, and it's like 20 years of their correspondence, and it's just like super delightful book. So I'm keeping this one. And the last book I have here before we move on to manga / graphic novels is Everyday Sexism by Laura Bates. This is like a collection of, I don't know, like submissions to the Everyday Sexism, I think it's a blog, and she just published this book of all these different like instances or these different submissions that people had given her. And I've heard super good things about Laura Bates as an author. This is something, I haven't read it yet, but I'm still really interested in reading it. I don't know if it's something you can just read straight through, or you need to read straight through, or if it's something you can kind of dip in and out of. So eventually I will read it, but it is staying on my TBR for now. All right, moving on to graphic novels. First up, I've got Sex Criminals Volume 1 by Matt Fraction and Chip Zdarsky. I read this years ago and I thought it was fine. I have a very, I don't know, like interesting relationship with graphic novels in that I will read the first volumes almost all the time. Like I'll just read the first volume and then I will never continue on, which is the case for this. It's about these two characters who have sex with each other, and then every time they have an orgasm, time stops, and they are the only two people that it happens to. And then I think they find out that it's actually like illegal or something and people are after them. I don't really remember the specifics of it, and I'm also just not super interested in continuing on with this series anymore, so I think I'm gonna unhaul this one. Next up, I've got the first volume of The Wicked and the Divine by, who's the author? Kevin Gillen, I think. Kieran Gillen. This, I read the entirety of the series last year and loved it. It's like probably up there in some of my like favorite graphic novels ever, and so I am gonna be keeping this and hopefully eventually collecting them all, and then like I can reread it whenever I want. Next up is the first volume of the Rick and Morty graphic novel series, which belongs to Cole, so I will be keeping it, obviously. He's a huge Rick and Morty fan. I don't even know if he's read it, but it's his, so I'm keeping it. Next, I've got the first 2 volumes of East of West by Jonathan Hickman, I think is the author, is the writer. I should do better about this. Jonathan Hickman, and it was illustrated by Nick Dragata. A couple of years ago, this was super popular. It was kind of like in the same amount of popularity as Saga, and I read the first volume and I really enjoyed it, so I bought the second one, and then I never continued on. But I was literally just thinking about this graphic novel series earlier today and thinking I really need to continue on with that. So I'm gonna be keeping these and hopefully reading this series at some point. It's not very long. I think it's only like 6 volumes, so an easy read. Next up, I've got the first 3 volumes of the Walking Dead comic series. I've read volume 1 and I've read volume 2. I haven't read volume 3, I don't think. Yeah, I definitely haven't. But I have seen a good majority of the Walking Dead show, or how many seasons are there now? Like 10? So I guess I've seen like the first 4 seasons of the show, and I just don't think it's any good anymore, but I am still super interested in reading the comics, so I'm gonna hang on to these for now. I might read this and think, not really interested in continuing on, because I know the series is like up into like the 40s volumes now, but I'm keeping these for now. Next, I've got the first volume of Chew, which also belongs to Colt, so we'll be keeping it, but I'm interested in reading this as well, so maybe I'll read it. I think it's about like a detective who's also a cannibal. I don't know if that's the truth, but it belongs to Cole, so we're keeping it. Next is the first volume of Monstrous by Marjorie Liu. I've heard really good things, or actually I've heard pretty mixed things about this series as a whole, but I did try to read this last year and just could not like get into it. So I don't know if it's like I haven't been in the mood for graphic novel or comic bind up, so I haven't been reading them, but I think I'm gonna unhaul this one. I'd be really interested to know your thoughts and opinions about this one down below, just because I know it is so popular, but I don't think I'm super interested in it anymore, so I'm gonna go ahead and unhaul it. The same can be said for Low, which is by Rick Remender. I actually did try to read this one as well, and I didn't like the art style, I didn't like the story, wasn't super interested in it, so I am gonna unhaul this one. I'm also gonna be unhauling both of the bind-ups I have of Rat Queens. I've read volume 1 and I really liked it, but I never continue on, and then I bought volume 3 for some reason but didn't buy volume 2, so I never continued on, and then I think something happened with the artist of the series and then it kind of went downhill after that. So I've decided I'm going to unhaul both of these, although I would recommend reading volume 1. It was really, really interesting, like really good. And I'm also going to unhaul Deadly Class volume 1, another one where I started it and then just like never continued on and I've lost interest. So I'm going to get rid of this one as well. I think there's a show maybe on like Sci-Fi or something based on this series now, and I think it's pretty popular, but I just am not interested in the series anymore. Next up, I have the first volume of Paper Girls by Brian K. Vaughan and Cliff Chang. I have read the first 2 volumes of the series and I really enjoy it, but when I read the first 2 volumes, the 3rd one hadn't come out yet, so I never continued on, but I'm still like interested in it, and so I'm gonna keep this and hopefully reread volume 2, continue on with the series, and hopefully I'll enjoy it. Next up, I've got the first 3 volumes of the Saga graphic novel series, which is one of my favorites. It's a basic answer, obviously. So many people love Saga, and for good reason. It's really good, and so I'm keeping these. I would eventually like to collect like all the volumes, but they're so expensive, so I think I got these all secondhand, like at thrift stores. Eventually, maybe I'll collect them all, but the series is like on an indefinite hiatus right now, and I'm still a little bit devastated by what happened at the end of the 9th volume, so I'm ready for them to come back and like finish it off and like completely rip my heart out. All right, moving on to manga. To be real, I'm gonna be keeping all the manga, so I am just gonna breeze through what I have and just let you know that all of these are staying on my TBR because Cole really wants me to get really into manga. So I bought a bunch of it and then I just read it whenever like I am in the mood for it. So I've got Full Metal Alchemist. I've got the bind up of volumes 1, 2, and 3, and I have read I've read the first volume of this and I loved it. So eventually I'll continue on, read the series. He really wants to watch the anime with me, but I want to read the manga before I watch. So eventually we'll watch it, but I am reading it and I do really enjoy it. I have the first 3 volumes of the Sailor Moon series, and I also have the first 3 volumes of the Hunter x Hunter series. The Sailor Moon manga series is only like 11 volumes long, so I do want to continue on and read all of them. I watched Sailor Moon as a kid and I loved the show, and so reading the manga is very nostalgic for me. I have read the first volume of Hunter x Hunter and I would like to continue on with the series as well, but I know that this manga series is like 40 volumes long, and I'm pretty sure the author is like sick or something. Like I know it's like nothing new has come out from it for a while, so I'm gonna keep these and eventually read them again or like continue on with the series, but they're not as high like on my priority list as the Sailor Moon ones. I also have the first 4 volumes of the Dream and Sun manga series by Ichigo Takano. I have read volumes 1 through 3 of this and I really like it. I need to read volume 4, and I think this is another one that's pretty short. Like there's only 8 or 9 volumes out, so I need to continue on with the series and finish it. But these are really fun. They're like, it's more contemporary and they're like kind of quirky, but I enjoy it. I'm really bad at describing manga because I don't know very much about it, but I have these. Also by Ichigo Takano, I have the first, or the complete collection of Orange volumes 1 and 2. This is another one that comes so highly recommended by people who love manga, and I just need to actually read them at some point. But they're so long, which is, even though they're manga, it's like a little bit intimidating to go for super long things. So that's why I haven't read them yet, but those are staying. And lastly, for manga, I have the first 3 volumes of Death Note. These are the black editions, so this is actually volumes 1 through 6. And I read Death Note last year, the first volume, and loved it. And so I bought volumes 2 and 3. Haven't continued on, but I'm planning on it. This is another one that's pretty short. I think there's only 6 black edition volumes, so 12 volumes total. And eventually I'm gonna get them all and I'm gonna read them and I'm probably gonna love them all. So these are obviously staying. Like I said, all the manga's staying. And moving on to the very last shelf, I've got the 100 Nights of Hero by Isabel Greenberg, which is a chunky graphic novel, like series of little vignettes that I read last year, I think. And I really enjoyed this. Actually, I think I read it earlier this year. I don't know, time doesn't make sense. I really liked this, but I don't think I'm gonna keep it. I don't think I will ever like feel the need or desire to reread it, so I am gonna unhaul this one. But I would recommend it if you are into graphic novels, because the art in this is beautiful and the story's great. I've got the entirety of the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. Again, I'm keeping these nostalgic reasons. I would like to have the series on my shelf. I got the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe separately from the other books in the series, so they don't match, but I'm keeping all of these. I've read them when I was a kid, really enjoyed the series, so keeping these on my shelves. I've also got a few more middle grade stuff here. The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan, the first book in the Percy Jackson series. This actually belongs to my brother, and I have it because I was planning on reading the entire series, and for some reason I don't know why I don't have the rest of them, because he owns all of them. They're at my parents' house, but I have this. I'm not getting rid of it because it doesn't belong to me, obviously. Artemis Fowl by Eowyn Colfer, which also belongs to my brother, so again, not getting rid of it. It's on my TBR, but I don't think I'm actually ever gonna read it, which is bad, so I should probably just return it to my brother, but obviously not getting rid of it. I've got When You Reach Me by Rebecca Steed, which is a middle grade book that I read a couple years ago, and I really enjoyed it, but I don't think I'll ever reread it, so I actually think I'm gonna unhaul this one. I would recommend it. It's definitely for like a more younger middle grade reader, but it was fine. It was enjoyable, and I'm just not a big middle grade reader, honestly, so I'm gonna unhaul it. I've got Fortunately the Milk by Neil Gaiman, which is just this really quirky little book about a dad who goes out to get milk for his kids, and then he has all these adventures. He's gone forever, and he comes back and he says, all these things happen to me, and it's just this cute little story, and I really enjoyed this, so I'm gonna be keeping it. Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones is a book that I read last year and I really enjoyed, and I'm gonna be keeping this. Cole and I are eventually planning on doing a video where we read and watch the movie and compare them. He has suggested us doing that video so many times, but he won't actually finish reading the book, so we haven't done it yet, but eventually we are going to do that, so this is staying on my shelf. I've read it though, so it's not on my TBR. And finally, Perks of Being a Wallflower by Stephen Chbosky. I'm not really sure why this book is on this shelf with middle grade instead of like on the other shelf, but this is, you know, like a classic YA book that everybody has read and enjoys, and I'm going to be keeping it on my shelf. Next up, I've got A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness, which is like a middle grade book, but it's also kind of like a graphic novel. One of my favorite books that I have ever read, so this one's gonna be staying on my shelf as well. Honor Girl by Maggie Thrash is a graphic memoir that I read last year and I really enjoyed, but I don't think I'm gonna keep it just because I have already read it and I don't ever foresee myself rereading it. It was super enjoyable, really great read, but just not something that I want to keep on my shelf, but I would highly recommend it if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. And finally, the last book on this shelf is My Favorite Thing is Monsters by Emile Ferris. This is a chunky graphic novel that so many people have read and recommended, including Madeline from Novel Inc., Emily from Possibly Literate. A bunch of people have just like raved and raved about how good this is. And the only reason I haven't read it yet, well, there's two reasons actually. One is it is massive and it's a little bit intimidating. Two, there's a sequel to this one that is, I think it was supposed to come out this year, but I think it got pushed back to next year, so it hasn't come out yet, so that's why I haven't actually read it. But this one is staying on my shelf, staying on my TBR, and I'm still super excited to read this. So those are all the books that are on these shelves in this room. There are some mass market books down here that mostly like Juliette Marillier and the Charlene Harris, the Suki Sackhouse series, which I got from a friend earlier this year, and I'm still planning on reading them. I just don't want to go through all of them because I just hauled them earlier this year and I know I'm not getting rid of any of them, and they're already all on, I mean, they're on my TBR, so I'm not showing them, but they are down there. This was a little bit weird because it was mostly graphic novels, manga, and then obviously like some nonfiction, classics, stuff like that. So the numbers are a little bit weird. I actually didn't total everything that was in this room just because it was mostly graphic novels and I'm actually keeping most of it, so I don't really feel the need to get the numbers on that. There are a few like graphic novels. I don't know, like 1, 2, 3 of these are coming off of my TBR. 1, 2, only, well, and all those. There's only like 10 books coming off my TBR in this video because, like I said, I wasn't planning on getting rid of a lot of the manga. I wasn't planning on getting rid of a lot of the graphic novels. I wasn't planning on getting rid of a lot of the nonfiction. So it's just, you know, a few things here and there. But I knew this installment of this series was going to be less interesting than the rest because it is mostly stuff I'm keeping. So, but I did want to go ahead and show you everything. So now you know all the books that I own and you can shame me for how many books I own if you want to. Hello, Editing Lindsay here. I just wanted to jump in and say that I decided that I do want to split up this portion of the unhaul into 2 different videos. It was going to end up being like an hour long if I just made it one video, and I really didn't want to post an hour-long video. So I am stopping this portion of the video here, and then my next video will be part 7, which will be all the books that are out in my living room. Stay tuned because there will be one more part to the unhaul series. I just wanted to give a heads up why I'm wearing the same clothes and why the editing is going to be a little bit strange on this video and the next video. So that's the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you again in a couple days. Bye!